September 5th, 1620, the Atlantic Ocean. A wooden vessel barely 100 feet long cuts through the gray, merciless waters of the North Atlantic, carrying 102 souls and a single untested idea. The idea that ordinary men and women could build a society governed not by kings, but by conscience. The ship was called the Mayflower, and what it carried was not just people. It carried the seed of something that would one day shape the entire world. But before that seed could bloom, it had to be watered in blood. For over a century and a half, the 13 colonies endured under the rule of the British Crown, taxed without representation, silenced without justice, controlled without consent. The tension built like pressure behind a sealed door. And then, on April 19, 1775, in Lexington and Concord, someone fired a shot. Historians would call it the shot heard around the world. Within weeks, a ragged colonial militia was standing against the most powerful military force on Earth. A Virginia planter named George Washington was handed command of this impossible army. His soldiers were starving, barefoot, and dying in the snow.
Valley Forge. But what Washington had, and what the British Crown could never understand, was something more dangerous than cannons. He had belief, and he had a continent willing to die for it. On July 4th, 1776, 56 men signed the Declaration of Independence, announcing to the world that all men are created equal, endowed with the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The British called it treason. History called it the birth of a nation. By 1783, the war was won, but the Republic was fragile and deeply contradicted, because even as its founders spoke of liberty, nearly 700,000 human beings remained enslaved on American soil. That contradiction would define the next 80 years and eventually tear the nation apart. In 1861, the Civil War began, the bloodiest conflict in American history. Abraham Lincoln held the Union together through 4 years of catastrophic warfare, issued the Emancipation Proclamation, and freed the enslaved people of the Confederate States. Then, just 5 days after the war ended, he was assassinated. The nation wept and moved forward as it always had, carrying scars it would never fully lose. The decades that followed brought industrialization, immigration, and transformation. Millions poured through Ellis Island, looking up at a copper statue holding a torch above the gray harbor waters. Railroads stitched the continent together. Steel towers rose. A new America was being built, loud, ambitious, and hungry. But the world would not allow America to stay turned inward for long. In 1917, it entered the First World War. Then, on December 7th, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. Franklin D. Roosevelt called it a date which will live in infamy. America went to war on 2 fronts across 2 oceans. 16 million Americans served in uniform. On June 6, 1944, Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy. In August of 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ending the war in days and opening a moral wound the world has never fully healed from. America emerged from the Second World War as the most powerful nation on Earth, but power brought new burdens. The Cold War against the Soviet Union consumed 4 decades, and at home, the Civil Rights Movement shook the foundations of society. In 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a segregated bus in Montgomery, Alabama. In 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. stood before 250,000 people at the Lincoln Memorial and told them he had a dream. In 1968, he was killed. The Cold War ended in 1991. The United States stood alone, the world's sole superpower. And then came September 11th, 2001. 2 hijacked planes struck the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. Nearly 3,000 people died in a single morning. America went to war in Afghanistan and Iraq. Wars that would last 2 decades, cost beyond counting. The 21st century brought financial collapse, political fracture, and a global pandemic that killed over 1 million Americans. The nation argued, loudly, painfully, without resolution, about what a country built on the promise of freedom actually owed to every person living within its borders, from the Mayflower to the moon landing, from Valley Forge to Vietnam, from the auction blocks of the antebellum South to the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. The story of the United States is not a clean story. It is not a simple story. It is a story still being written by every generation that inherits its contradictions and decides, against all evidence, to believe in its promise anyway.